Hi, everyone, and welcome to Marketing Corner episode 84.
Whoop whoop. Yay.
Thank you. Over to you, Casper, for the sound effect.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Thanks.
So today what we wanted to talk about is something that I think a lot of companies actually probably ignore, or they don't have anything in place until it's too late, is crisis comms.
Yeah.
So talking about if there's a crisis that comes at your company, whether there's, I don't know, some kind of scandal or some kind of public relations nightmare or some kind of technical issue that could really damage your reputation and make you lose a lot of customers. Who does the crisis comms? What is the crisis comms? How do you do it? How do you make sure everyone in the company sings from the same hymn sheet? So yeah, over to you, Casper. What kind of experience do you have in crisis comms, or what do you think about that?
Yeah. So it's a mixed bag for me because I have some experiences. It's not my forte. I'm just gonna be honest. So for everyone listening, if you're like, hey, who should I talk to about crisis communication? Probably not Casper. But but with that said, I've tried it a few times. I think my best experiences are like the ones I've had the most experience with is from my days at Trustpilot. Because back then and still, but especially back then, Trustpilot was a little bit new kid on the block. Was growing really fast, and it was like suddenly you had companies that weren't used to being reviewed, scrutinized before, and now they were suddenly being scrutinized in the public, and that brought a lot of people who got really mad at Trustpilot. So I was handling the social media and everything, and then there was like literally communities and groups forming that were like hating on Trustpilot and stuff like that. And back then I had no idea what to do. So I was like, what do we do here? Like, what do we ask? And actually, like looking back, we shouldn't have done anything, which is kind of what we did.
So you did it right.
Yeah, but we spent so much time analyzing it, and like looking back, it's like so much waste of time. That's not the perfect example. It's definitely not on what you should do across the board. But I think there's a lot of things you can ignore, and then there's things you can't ignore, right? So in my personal take, you gotta figure out first, is this something that should be ignored, or is this something you actually need to deal with? Because if you need to deal with it, you need. My approach is pretty simple. You need to be proactive. You need to get in front of it.
Yes,
so I think a good example. It's not based on a company. It's more like a personal. So there was this recently this documentary in Denmark about sexual harassment from in the musical industry, like the musicians, and then some actor, a famous actor, and on his so. He actually did the right play in terms of crisis communication. So he actually went in front of it because, like, everyone watching the documentary without mentioning a name, everybody knew exactly who it was.
Right.
And he did the right, he played it by the book, where he went out before the documentary was out and came out with a statement and blah blah blah, did this and apologized and did this whole thing. And from a communication perspective, that was actually exactly what you should be doing. That didn't solve you still got burned a lot, but it was better than doing it the opposite way, at least in my opinion. So I think you can learn a lot from these cases, but there are also my impression is also there's also cases sometimes I haven't tried that myself, where it's like some really large corporation where it's like, okay, how the fuck do we get back from this, right? It's so bad that Boeing, some of the cases with Boeing,
Boeing.
aircraft, some of these cases, like Jesus, how do you even come back from that? So, and I'm not an expert there, to be honest. What about you guys at Onomondo? Have you tried some of it, or?
Yeah, so not necessarily that this has happened at Onomondo, but I think there's two different. There's kind of maybe like a technical, like if you have an outage or if you have some kind of bug, or like the CrowdStrike. I mean, that was pretty huge, but
that was the biggest. That was the biggest thing in history, I think.
Yeah, and that's like getting everyone to get off grid and have fresh water. But there's that kind of angle, and then there's like the PR of like people being bad in your company, right? There's two kind of branches of managing reputations and kind of crises. And if you kind of Google it or go on ChatGPT, a lot of times you'll hear about these interpersonal crises. And I'll give you an example. I know someone who worked at a very, very large international company, household name, you would have heard about it, probably. And one of their C-level got in trouble because the woman he was having an affair with decided to break it off, and he chased her with a golf club. And the PR of this obviously was
Casual
like,
Tuesday.
how do we, so that is one crisis comms. And I would hate to be that marketing person who's like, how do I put a positive spin on an adulterer who then tries to assault his mistress? I am so happy I'm not in that position. But I think, like you said, with the Danish Me Too and stuff like that, it's like, get ahead of it, acknowledge you did something wrong, and then go away, go hide, spend time with the family, whatever, like politicians always say, but get in front of it, acknowledge it, go away. The other one, and that's more my comfort zone, right, is like if there is a technical problem or if there is something impacting customers. And I think that's the one I kind of wanted to talk about, because I think that's the one most marketing people who listen to our podcast are going to encounter, right? So how do we manage something like this? And I think I'll talk a little bit about my take on it and how we do it. And then, of course, over to you what you think. But so one of the issues that we had in the beginning is it was very technical. Like if we had a system problem, it was the engineers writing something that went on a startup status page. And of course, what other people were doing, which is the same thing we do, is we watch other companies' status pages. And if they're having a problem, that is a really great opportunity for us to do something about, to kind of jump on. If someone else is having an issue, we can jump on and say like, hey, are you tired of issues? And people did that to us. We're doing it to them. But it was never put in human language, one, because you have technical people saying this is an issue in this particular area. And it wasn't kind of, I don't know. I've never really worked in a space where the technical issues had been explained in a way that made people feel better, right? It's not like we are on it and we're getting on it and it's going to be resolved by this and we endeavor to keep you updated. It was when you have technical people doing it, one, they probably don't have the word smithing capabilities. That's not their strong point of like being flowery. But two, they don't have the time because they're too busy fixing the damn thing. Yeah. And so it was how do you kind of bridge making sure that the technical side of things so that we can report accurately gets communicated to the right people, but not to everyone. Yeah. And that's kind of the balance that I've had to strike in a bunch of my different jobs, right? We have to let people know that there's a problem, but we don't want everyone to know. It's not something we would put on me, for example. No. But how about yourself?
Yeah, I think so. And I keep we just had an episode just before for everyone listening about copywriting, right? Like, and I feel like copywriting plays such a big part of this. Because like, so one thing is the motions you go through with like acknowledging and then resolving and then absolution. I think those are kind of like the 3 steps. And typically the way I think about it is like the copywriting can do so much for you, right? Like, let's use an example. Like whenever you probably all seen this, like the Slack updates. When there's Slack updates and there's updates to the app, it's like always funny, like really funnily written. Like the updates are like, "Hey, we had a bug, we squeezed it with our foot, right?" Or something like that. Yeah. And if you can do the same around your like, "Hey, okay, we had a system breakdown. We're trying to fix it as soon as possible. In the meantime, the next chocolate milk is on us," or I don't know, whatever. Or you play around with it. So, because like, what the fuck can you do? Like, unless there's some things that need to be communicated, like, hey, try these things or do this, do X, Y, Z, or stuff like that. Yeah. Like, fair enough, that needs to be communicated. But if there's literally like, the best thing we can do right now is just be patient and wait. We're trying to fix this as soon as possible. Then play with it. Like, that's the best way to get the people. Talk to their humanity. Talk to their human side, right? Like, if you end up like being, I think the worst thing you can do is being too corporate about these things. Like being too non-robotic, I think is the right word. Like if you be too robotic, like, hey, this was caused by an error in XYZ, blah 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 blah. We're working on a solution right now or whatever. Like, just be real, say it like it is, and say like, don't have to throw shit at other people, but just be like, hey, we fucked up. We're trying to fix it. Mm-hmm. That's at least that's what I've had an experience with, and that's worked pretty well. But it's not for everyone. I know that's a thing.
And I think with crisis comms, there's a few things to keep in mind, right? There's like, the internal comms, making sure that if sales are talking to prospects who are being impacted, what does sales have to say? If someone's talking shit about you on LinkedIn, what does marketing have to do? If a customer is contacting CS going, what the hell's going on? How do you speak to them? And you need to kind of all be saying the same thing, because I have been in situations in companies where we say one thing, sales say something else, the customer says something else, and then a whole shitstorm brews because it's like, well, you told me this, and then you said this on social media. And so the first step for me, I think...
Yeah, go ahead, sorry. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say the first step in that is making sure we all have kind of one... We say in English, singing from the same hymn sheet, but we're all on the same page. Yep. We're all saying the same thing. And for me, that's CS. CS decide how we say this, what words we use, how much information we give the public, and then what CS say, what they're telling the customers is what we will then say externally to make sure that we all say the same thing.
And I think, I wasn't a big part of this, but I kind of, sometimes you learn from watching on the side. And I think at Trustpilot, they did some pretty cool. So whenever stuff like this happened, they would always, I kind of learned that they would put down a task force. So you would have a task force, be like, okay, whenever something urgently happens, something big, right? They would put down together a task force, and there's not always be the same people, but most of the time the same people. And then they would, you're kind of saying it yourself, and the first thing they would do was create a statement of, what do you call a statement of words or something, where it's like a playbook, essentially. Where it's like, okay, when this is like, hey, to this question, here's the answer. To this question, here's the answer. So like a set of questions, a set of let's call it opinions that you could share. And then you would say like, okay, and the whole task force would get together and create this together, so everyone was aligned, and then that task force would spread it out internally in the company and take each role would dedicate like their function. So marketing would be like, okay, we're communicating on social. The CEO would be like, write a post about it. Sales would be like, hey, we'll send it out to our customers or an email. Our CS would be on the customers and prospects and whatever, right? And across the board. And so you had a task force and stuff like that. And kind of like who runs the task force would be like your PR and comms person. That would be like the leader of the task force team. But that was, I thought that was pretty efficient, like from what I saw. That was a great way to do it, because like you also don't want to, especially in some companies. I think Trustpilot was a good case because like there was a lot going on, like there was a lot of stuff, crisis potentially to handle. But I think like in a normal company, I don't know too much about Onamundo in that sense, but I don't think there's a crisis that often, right? It's not.
No, not at all. And that's the thing.
Exactly.
And I think that's when I started the episode, right? Because it's so infrequent, you tend to not be prepared. But when it does happen, you need to be fast, but you also need to be informative, and you need to keep it under control. And that's something that's hard to do if you have nothing prepared, right? Exactly. So that's what the purpose of this episode is. I think maybe it should sit with the marketing team, because the biggest, it's all about communicating, right? And getting the word out there. So maybe for the marketers out there, put together a crisis comm plan. I think you're absolutely right. Like one of the things that we've done is we have like a matrix of like non-urgent. So if this is like planned maintenance, or if it's something that no one's really going to notice, but our team noticed and was like, let's fix this before it's a problem. So we have different levels of urgency all the way to like shit's hitting the fan. What do we do? And then, and actually when I worked at FIFA, we had a very similar thing. If I had when I worked at FIFA, we were doing the transfer of players. It's all done on a platform. If that platform goes down, we're going to get eaten alive by everyone, right? Because everyone already hates FIFA, and then all of a sudden we're having a technical problem. But it's the same kind of vibe. Like, what do we need to communicate about, and what do we keep quiet because no one's going to notice anyway? But if people are going to notice, don't keep it quiet. That's an important divide. And then what we do is we have CS, we'll talk to the technical team, find out what is the problem, and then this is what we're going to communicate to customers. And then that goes to sales, that goes to the marketing team. The marketing team have already kind of pre-approved templates, like copy paste. If this, then say this. If that, say that.
Yeah, exactly.
So hopefully we have that already covered. But if not, we get, we would take the information from technical, from CS, we would write it, get it approved, make sure we're saying the right thing, right? Because the marketing team is not going to be always the most technical people in the world. Get that approved by the tech team. Yes, that's actually what's happening. And then share that out. And one of the other things we do, and this is a question that happens a lot, right? Do we just put something on our SoMe page? Do we put something on our status page that's open access to anyone? And what we've decided to do is only to customers or people who have actively reached out to us and said, hey, is there something wrong? Then we will go to them and be very open about that. And say, sign up to this status page to find out what's going on. And then we also have people who, if they've been really impacted, then we make sure that we do a follow-up call, email, whatever, with the CEO, CTO, whoever, to make sure that we kind of fix any problems that could have happened to our relationship as a result of this technical issue.
Exactly. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and I think it's just like a lot of people I've seen opposite cases where people go into this like the classic rabbit hole of like creating battle plans for everything. It's a scenario planning, right? Like where you plan
again,
for every possible.
It depends on your industry, right? Yeah.
If you're a 50,000 people company, like it might make sense to do some scenario planning. But if you're a 500 man scale up, probably not that much, right? Like So I think it's, as everything else in life, it's contextual. But I think my point is like having this kind of like at least an idea of like, okay, we need to put these people together, and then we need to create something that everyone can communicate around, and then everyone in their departments need to be separate, like hold accountable for what they do,
and make sure they say the same things.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Because we don't want anyone going rogue. And I know sometimes you want to make it sound less than it is, or maybe you want to be more apologetic, or you want to, and if word gets out that you're not all saying the same thing, then it's just going to make it even worse.
Exactly. It gets super messy so fast, right? Like, so I think, I don't think, go ahead, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, I think, I was just going to say for the marketers out there, who don't have a crisis comms, I think, the kind of starting high level, what are the objectives of your comms? What are you trying to do? You're trying to inform people if something has happened or something's about to happen. You want to protect your customers, you want to protect your reputation, and you want to prevent things from upsetting or causing more problems. So there's kind of three, at least in my view, there's three core objectives of what you're trying to do. And then it's up to you, based on your organizational chart, how do you best do that? How do you inform externally and internally? How do you protect, and how do you prevent?
Exactly. I don't have too much more to add, Jen. Like, I think if you're ever in a crisis, this is like, do what Jen just said.
Do what I say. No, but I think bare bones, main objectives: inform, protect, prevent. When do we talk to people? When do we not talk to people? Who decides what we say? Marketing, you own the SOMI. Sales, you own the prospects. CS, you own the customers. And you definitely have to do a postmortem at the end. Get together, what happened, exactly what happened, why did it happen? And it depends also on your industry. If you're dealing with very technical people like I do, sometimes it needs to be broken down very technically of what happened when, because this could also impact what they have to do, right? To fix if something went offline or if something needs to be restarted.
You got to get the right people in the room, right? Like, you got to make sure the right people are in the room from the get-go. I think so. That's kind of also the task force whole idea is like, make sure it's especially if it's once you get larger, there's so many people you can involve. So it's like, okay, let's get the right people in the room. You also don't want too many cooks in the kitchen.
No,
like I think that's something I've learned as well. I just want to add. This is like, hey, we have 20 people. Like, that's way too many. Like,
too many. You have to work fast too.
You have to work fast. I think like a good number is probably 5. Like, so you need the marketing/PR comms. Then you probably need the CEO if it's big enough, and then you need like CS, sales, and product. That's it. Mm-hmm. Those are the people you probably put in a room, and then they can distribute it to the rest of the organization how they see fit, right? So,
what happened? Why did it happen? When did it get fixed? And what do people need to do now? Do they need to download a firmware update? Do they have to restart? Do they whatever they might have to do? Get it out, let them know, and then support them and support your CS team. I hate when there's a problem and everyone's like, "Over to you, CS. Good luck, guys." We had this. When I was at FIFA, there was a problem with the platform. And so for those who don't know football, there's a window for transfers, and the transfer of players has to happen by a certain time. If it doesn't happen, they have to wait till the next window opens, usually 6 months later. Every country has a different time, so I'm not going to go into that. But so if they can't get the transfer done because of us, that's pretty fucked up because now their players can't play for 6 months, and this is their livelihood. So it's a big deal. And when we have transfer windows closing, you're on call 24/7 just in case someone's having a technical problem.
Yeah.
And we had a huge problem, where the system could not handle the amount of people on it. Very common problem for a lot of companies, a lot of tech companies that have a platform. There's too many people trying to access it, and it slows everything down, and then you know just everything becomes a shit show. And our tech team went home. Because they're like, well, we're done at 5. And I was in the kind of the client relations team, and I'm like, the hell you will.
Fuck
I'm
no,
here,
guys.
Yeah, I'm here till midnight taking all these calls, but it's not anything we did. You guys have to be here to tell us, fix this problem. Like, how do we do it? And, we got through it, but man, it was fucking awful. And we were very much left holding the bag. So don't let that happen to anyone else.
Yeah, don't let anyone do that.
It only happened once, but that one time was awful. So it was enough.
Exactly.
And I think it's really cool too when you see the CEO or the CTO hopping on the phone and taking calls and responding to emails and making sure that they are a part of this and they are very present and it's being taken seriously. That's a really important thing that you need your customers to see. We take this seriously. This doesn't happen all the time, but we have our shit together. Don't worry.
And I think, like, especially most people, and I say most people, and I mean most people, it doesn't mean everyone, but most people are okay with other companies or people making mistakes. Like, it's about how you deal with the mistakes, right? Like,
Exactly.
so if you as a company, like, hey, we didn't make a mistake, and you actually did fuck up, that's really bad. Whereas if you made a mistake and just like, yep, we fucked up, we're sorry.
Yeah.
Here's how we were gonna fix it. That's way better. Like there's I can't, like, there's probably cases, but I can't come up with cases where you want to do it the other way at least.
No, you don't want to pretend nothing happened. I mean,
no, exactly. Some a lot of companies like to do that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the worst because you can. And then how trustworthy are you? Then that comes into the protecting your reputation. If I can't trust you, especially like our area, right? No one's heard of our companies, most of them. So, if someone has trusted us, no one ever got fired for choosing IBM, So if someone trusts
the classic.
you, the classic, if they trust you and you betray that trust, what does it take? 8 tries to win back a customer who has been burned once. So, so it's all about protecting your reputation, being open, communicate, and then fixing it. And I think one of the things we have heard from I've heard from customers in other roles is that they like to be kept updated. You kind of think maybe you're annoying if you send an update every 2 hours, every 3 hours, but actually if you're waiting for something to come back online, I appreciate that because when I don't hear anything, I think you forgot about me. I think I'm the only one with this problem. I think, maybe you don't give a shit. Oh no, you've burnt down, your building burnt down. Keep them updated. Just over communicate in this case, I think is better than under communicating.
And on that note, we're going to under-communicate now because we're going to shut down.
Shut it down.
Shut it down. But thanks for listening, guys. This is Crisis Communication 101. We cross our fingers that you don't have to experience too much of this, but if you do, now you at least have somewhat of a plan for what to do.
Yeah. Get it ready now so you don't need it later when it's too late.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks so much.
Take care, guys. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye-bye.